Morning. I'm John Warr, and a big welcome to today's webinar. Unlocking. We got this recorded, by the way, Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah. So, good morning. Welcome to Unlocking Business Growth Through Marketing Automation. Thanks for joining us. We've got about 40 minutes together, and we will move ahead quickly. So, what are we going to learn today? What is marketing automation? Going to understand which types of businesses will benefit most, how it's going to improve lead quality, sales alignment, and conversion rates, how to implement it using your existing teams and tools without blowing your budget. And basically, what we're looking at is how you can use these systems to create a sales and marketing solution in a box for your business using existing resources without increasing marketing or sales spend. The webinar follows three sections. The first part is about setting the scene. The second part is around tactics for success. So we'll talk about how you set up a sales and marketing solution in a box. And then thirdly, we'll pick up on some of the future impacts, what's coming around the corner in terms of AI, and understanding how some of the new privacy regulations will start to impact what happens going forward. So setting the scene, we'll start with. Google definition, marketing automation is the use of software and technology to automate repetitive marketing tasks and workflows. So basically, it talks about how you use automations to improve some of your marketing activities, and with the view that it delivers a better customer engagement and drives business growth. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't talk to you really about how it impacts the buyer journey, how it's better at engaging leads at the right place in their journey, and how to have conversations with them that allows them to feel they can buy at their own pace. And this is the kind of stuff we'll talk about over the next 25 minutes. The buyer journey. A lot of people have this view that the buyers go through a nice little funnel. So we always talk in marketing about funnels. People come in at the top, they come out at the bottom. The reality is that people do not conform to nice little funnels starting at the top, finishing at the bottom. What people tend to do is to jump in and out of a buyer journey. So some people may start with seeing an advert, others might have a referral, some people might visit your website via a Google search. Others then may check into you in terms of checking some of your LinkedIn space or whatever, but people tend to jump in and out of the buyer journey. They don't follow a nice little perfect linear path. So we can deduce from this that each buyer is unique. We're all human. We all have our different buyer checklists. Some people buy things on the basis of price. Others may look more at something like value. Others are more attuned to brand. Some people are very technical. Some people are very emotional. We all buy differently, and we also like to buy at our own pace. But buyers do leave clues, and these clues will tell them where they are in their buyer journey. And somehow you can tell whether it's a broad search on the search term or whether it's a very targeted search. They may be looking at things like comparisons, downloads, reviews, doing brand and due diligence. So you get this idea of where people are based on what their actual activity is, what it is that they're doing. Typically, certainly in the B2B space, a buyer will typically have around about 22 to 25 touch points with a business before a purchase. Around 19 of them is generally self-served. So people do a lot of research quite often before they actually directly talk with the company. And it is only literally in the last half a dozen touches where you get the human one-to-one relationship. So there's an industry out there. It's called the marketing technology industry, or Martech. And there's a website out there which is called the Martech Map. And what it does is it demonstrates all of the marketing technologies. There's 14,000 of them in 2025, or 2024, I think this is. And these technologies are designed to help provide an insight so people can understand where people are in their buyer journey. So some of these technologies are around CRM systems, others may be around social media management, others are around chat modules that you might put on websites, but there's a whole plethora of technologies out there, and we all get bombarded with them every day. And what they're trying to do is to give you an insight into where people are in the buyer's journey. The buyer's journey, if we go back to classic marketing, may start from an awareness right the way down to a purchase. So people go through this here is that sort of funnel type. But if we go back to the old days, then marketing was purely around awareness and interest, and then sales was around the section for consideration through to purchase. But nowadays, because of this 19 activities being done behind the scenes, marketing has a much more stronger hold or influence over the overall sales cycle. Um, so what people tend to do, and this is the normal classic Martech stack, is most people realize very early on that they need a CRM system. So they quite often start with a CRM, Zoho, Salesforce, Pipedrive, Sugar. There's loads of them out there. And then they start to think about how do we add on or build on the other marketing technologies to help us understand where people are in the buyer's journey. And they quite often start by having an email marketing tool added on, a MailChimp or Constant Contact. They then add in something like realize that they need to do some sort of funnel process. So they create a pipe drive or they do a lead page management. They perhaps get caught up with something like lead forensics, where people start to try and tell them about people coming to their website. But you get the idea that what people start to do is they build a series of products that they try and integrate or push together. The reality is that all of these products all have slightly different measurements and metrics. They all work in slightly different ways. They all define things slightly differently. So, although technically there is a connection between them, they don't talk all in exactly the same language. And then what you end up with is a solution that works, but it's not perfect. Um, I sometimes call this the Frankenstack. So lots of businesses build these kind of Frankenstacks. So marketing automation has basically grown over the last years. And marketing automation is a series of platforms or tools which are often used by companies, which allows them to simplify this whole marketing stack. And of the 80% of the best performing companies in the world, sorry, of the top performing companies in the world, 80% of them use a marketing automation stack. Now, that doesn't mean that because they've got the marketing automation stack, they're automatically successful. It just means that these are the companies that have worked out how to best utilize these systems. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the second section of today's webinar. There's lots of these systems which are effectively an all-in-one solution. And the all-in-one solution is probably the most well-known one out there is HubSpot, which works both from the small business with the small company size, small feature set, right the way up to the large enterprise systems. But we have ones in between as well. Obviously, again, at the top end, you've got your Salesforce Pardot or your Salesforce Marketing Cloud as it is now. And then there's some which are designed for companies with a smaller size with a different feature set. And the kind of ones we often work with are high level, constant contact, occasionally with active campaign. But there are different systems out there, and depending on the size of your company, the feature set that's required will determine the best solution for your business. So, what's the value or power of having an all-in-one system? Well, an all-in-one system basically means you can have sales and marketing in a single box, which means you can, with a single interface, have everything from the capture, engage, convert, expand, and attract, that complete cycle through the sales cycle, using a series of technologies within the system that are completely and fully integrated. So you have your sales, your CRM systems, your email marketing, everything from your ad management right the way through to your social media and sales engagement all in one place. The beauty of it is it's a single contract. It's one easy to learn platform. You learn it once and it works for everybody. It's connected and seamless. And one of the nice things about it is a unified database. So you only have the data all in one place. And the big value of that is it's effectively got an inbuilt CRM with all the marketing wrapped around it. And it also helps with compliance because it means you have all your data in one place. So when you get your subject access request, you only have to collect the data from one place to be able to serve any requests that might come in. So what you end up with is a much more sensible looking system. It's simpler, smarter, and it's scalable. Benefits. Obvious benefits is it means your sales and marketing working together off the same system. You get complete consistency of message. You get clarity on your target markets. So that all comes together on that one. Your messaging becomes more consistent. You get better leads and better conversions, and everything is measurable. So you can double down on what works. Um, why companies implement it? Other reasons to implement it include, it minimizes your manual work, increases your lead volumes, improves your workflow, and it centralizes your data. And quite clearly here, there's a visibility control element. You do it right. You have ownership and management of all your data in one place, and you focus on what works for you again to drive effective ROI. So let's talk through in the next section now, which is what would you need to do to set up an all-in-one sales and marketing solution? What are the success criteria? How do you build the system that will work for you and your business? And then, as I say, we're going to go into the last section, which is how privacy and AI will impact marketing automation. So where do we start? Well, we start at the beginning. Um, classic here. If you fail to plan, you're gonna have you're not going to succeed. So we have to start by doing the basics. Most companies will have a business strategy. They know what their goals, their target market are. They'll understand their customer. They know who they are, what their needs, their pain points, what they need to buy. And they probably have a content plan. They've probably already put together a series of marketing assets, some articles, some blogs, some white papers. Um, but what a lot of companies don't do, and this is a really important bit that needs to be done, is to really delve deeply into your audience and your segmentation. So one of the things we do as our business is when we engage with a client, the first thing we do is a workshop, which is really geared towards this element, which is understanding who the different personas are, the different kind of buyers that you have, what's their avatar, what's their profile. Need to understand how they buy, what is the process that takes them through the buyer's journey, how do they start, how do they first engage, how do they interact, how do we move them through, what are the triggers and behaviors? What is it that they actually do that betrays where they are in the buyer journey? And then, based on what they've done, their trigger and behavior, what is the information you need to provide them to take them through to the next step? And then the last thing, which is very, very important here, is we start thinking about how you profile those people, not just around their name, address, age, what kind of business or sector they're in, but start thinking about what are the key information you need that helps you to be able to profile somebody so you can immediately tell who their persona are, where they are in the buyer's journey, and what you need to do to take them through to the next stage. So you lead them through the process from initial engagement through the nurturing process to a conversion event, and what fields are needed to help you do that. So once we've put that kind of stuff together, and just to give you some idea, you very quickly realize that if you do this piece of work, you quite often find there's multiple personas. And one example here I've got is recent work we've done with a retirement home vendor, where there was two very, very key personas. One was the retiree themselves, the person who actually wanted to live in a retirement home. And the other one was the family member, the person who was also involved in the buyer's journey, but wasn't themselves going to be a resident. And what you see is that the home vendor, sorry, the retiree, wants to have the best time of their life. They want to have fun. They want to go out. They want to be independent. They want to be able to really enjoy their retirement and do things that they used to do when they were kids again. Whereas the family member was probably more concerned about making sure they have a safe, secure environment, that they have all the support and the services they need to be able to ensure that they have ongoing care, and that they're effectively in a guilt-free environment with them being placed there. So you have to slightly change the messaging depending on who you're talking to, and this requires that you really understand your audience. Um, on the same vein, we have something here like a 5G network provider where their customers are ports, construction companies, airports, ships, shipping industry, or retail. But depending on which one they're talking to, there's a completely different set of requirements that they're looking for. So around the ports, they're looking around security, around construction. It's about being able to have access to communications in remote environments, like in the desert. With a ship, it's about communication between the ship and the land so the passengers could communicate whilst they're traveling out at sea. And retailers need it as a backup system. So again, it's very, very important you understand who your audience is and what the information they need to help them go through the buying process. Um, in today's world, we have something called hyper-personalized conversations, which basically means you can automate things, but when you automate things, you need to make sure that the communication is still written in a way that is meaningful and engaging and fulfilling both for the buyer and the seller. So it's important that having identified your personas, you then start writing content that is specifically written in their tone and voice to directly connect with those people. In the perfect world, which we'll talk about later with the advent of AI, is ultimately hyper-personalized is still in dealing more or less down a persona element. Ultimately, you want the ultimate one-to-one, the perfect nirvana, to be able to personalize individually every communication. So the engagement process, we're just going to talk through along the buyer's journey. So what we want to do is to make sure that we're looking at all of these touch points. There are, typically, as we say, around about 25 touch points, but every touch in the process, we need to be able to capture it. So capture is the first stage. So the first stage of building a perfect system to work for your business is firstly to understand what the different, having done the buyer journey, you've mapped it, you know how the buyer journey works. What are the different points? What are the different interactions? What are the different connections that you're trying to capture? So around your website, which may well have some tweaks done to it as a result of the work in that first initial workshop, do you know when they come and visit your website? Do you know what happens when they complete a contact form? What information do you need to provide them that they can download? Can you gate it so you know when they download the documentation? Are you building documentation for all the different stages in the buyer process? Perhaps you might have an interface for a website. You might want to run webinars and events and do registrations. So there's whole things that could be based around your website. There's a whole plethora of captures around social, around your LinkedIn connections, your profile views. You then have other things, which is obviously every time they interact with you on email, talk to you on WhatsApp, you may wish to run surveys and polls. So there's a whole series of apps and elements that you may need to consider and bring in that you start to build into your system. So the key is you need to have a system that allows you first to be able to capture and then manage that capture process. So quite obvious ones would be very, very simple forms, which you can arrange for them to pre-fill. So completing forms on websites. Another one could be just very basically whenever you download a paper or some information, a white paper, you're capturing their information. Again, they may well be using something like a chat interface on your website to talk to you, hello, welcome, etc. And then you need to set up the system to capture. So what you want them to do is when they reach a point in the branch, it basically says to help you further, let's capture your information. So use every engagement opportunity to find a way to capture their data and bring it into your system. So we will look at all of those different sources, whether it's paid advertising, referral, direct, social media, all the different capture points. We then also need to make sure we understand that source and that campaign and bring that information into your system. So if you can, firstly, capture all those events, tag them so you know where they came from, what the source was, and the campaign that was running behind it. Then what you can start to do is to build something which is a campaign process. So here we can see all the people that have come in each day, which is a lead that's come in, and against each lead, we can see exactly where those people came from. So the lead capture process here, right from day one, allows you to understand who these people are. Once people come into the system, then what you need to do is to profile them. So quite clearly, we start with a series of automations. You might say, thank you very much for completing our form on our website. You start right from the beginning by automatically assigning leads to people. If you can, you identify and assign a persona. You start to put them into segmented lists to campaigns, and you start filling out these customer fields. So right from the outset, with each interaction, you are capturing information which is starting to enrich or build into your database within your CRM. This will then put you in a good position to be able to know where they are in the buyer's journey and understand what you need to do to take them to the next step. So we build up a series of automations. So as you come in, you just automatically set these things up. So I'll come in, what are the different actions that you do, and then push them through to the systems. So the profiling, quite obviously, we can start with the contact details and the source and the capture technique. But what we need to start doing is also capture additional information. Start looking for clues to help understand their needs and their preferences. And if the clues don't exist, then set up systems or processes or automations to start asking them those questions. What kind of content is it that they're consuming? We'll also give you information about who they are and where they are in the buyer's journey and what they need. You can start using things like lead scoring. Um, so you can start to build up start using this information to determine which persona or avatar they are, which products or services of interest to them, what level of engagement they have, and where they are in the buyer's journey. So all this information starts to feed in. So here's an example of somebody going through the buyer's journey. This particular person here has so far gone through 47 events, which you can see. Each of these events along here have an icon associated with them in this particular system, which shows you when they've opened an email, when they've read a document, when they visited a website, when they've engaged with a chat message on your website, opened an email, replied to an email. And in this one example here, we just clicked on their web visit so we can see which pages they visited, what they saw, what they did, etc. So all of these interactions start to provide you clues to help you build up their profile and their lead score. In this case here, you can see this person's got a lead score of 101 already, which in our definition would become a hot lead, i.e. they're highly engaged, they're highly working with you in your system. And we can see here how this lead score is generated from the different interactions that they've made along the way. So custom fields, we mentioned it at the beginning. So custom fields need to be set up right at the outset when you're designing the system. We know that there's going to be different personas, that they're going to be involved in different parts of the buying cycle or selling cycle. And what we want to do is make sure that those fields are helping us to understand that. So quite obviously, you're going to set up the series of fields which allow you things like what's their turnover, what's their role, what's their sector, all the classic number of employees, typical cycle, etc., etc. So you'll have all the standard fields. But what you also need to start doing is thinking about more information, which is what was the most recent communication with them? Where are they in your buying cycle or your cycle? And what you do is you may build up a system that says they've watched the video, they've been to a webinar, they've done a discovery call. So, and what you start doing is setting up automations to automatically tick or complete elements as they go through the process. You'll obviously design your persona. So you'll start to get an idea of who they are, what are their pain points, what are their issues that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. And you're using this information to make sure that all your communications are completely tailored to match in a way that directly connects with these personas. What you'll start to do also is build up additional information. I've just shown some here, which is the things like the email subscriptions. But we do things here when we're working with clients. It's just an example where we've captured people's favorite drink, their pets, or their movies. But you in your business, when you start building this to interact with your customers, there may be some key bits of information that if you knew those, would really help you understand whether they're a really strong prospect for you or whether somebody you should unqualify. As we know, when we start working with people, their interest increases, they get to the point of a high level of engagement, and then they will start to dip away. So again, one key element of the process is around the engagement process, is making sure that as they get up to a heightened level of engagement, you maintain that level. So quite clearly, when somebody's highly engaged, then what you'll need to do then is to bring them through into your pipeline management for your opportunity pipeline. And here just gives some examples of the kind of systems that you can have, again, with pipeline stages, take people through their process and move people from one stage to the next. So the system should allow you to move from a lead process into a full opportunity, all within the same system. Um, One, certainly the larger companies we tend to work with can get caught out between the difference between a marketing lead and a sales lead. Um, Quite often, a marketing lead gets passed to the sales team as a marketing qualified lead, MQL. Um, but if the sales don't then qualify that lead, what happens? What quite often happens in most businesses, I'm sorry to say, is that a lot of those people just get lost. They drop off the bridge, as it's called. They get caught between the gap between the two. So one of the big advantages of an all-in-one system is that you can make sure that this doesn't become a one-way process where people drop off. You keep both marketing and sales fully engaged. So what you do is make sure that because marketing and sales are using exactly the same system, if a sales doesn't qualify it, it automatically passes back to marketing to continue the nurture process to better qualify the lead and then maybe pass it back to sales again. You're always going to have scenarios where people don't fall into nice, perfect buckets for you, undetermined leads. So again, there should be a series of techniques to help you just to ask simple questions. And, the best way to find out is to ask them. So send them an email or do an outbound call, LinkedIn message, whatever you want to use. What you're trying to do is understand a bit more information to help you qualify that particular prospect. You can also use things like progressive fields in forms, and we're going to talk about in a minute nurture campaigns. Um, so, there's a simple button. In this case, it's remove me, but it could be a quick question that just asks them something simple. And again, progressive fields, what you can do is if people come back to do a download, it pre-fills the form, but then asks an extra question that allows you just to get a bit more information to help you understand who that person is, how they perceive themselves as a buyer status, or maybe give you their current location. So you might know better, particularly if you're a regional based operation, who could serve them. So again, here's a suggestion here of booking time with somebody as another way of let's find out a bit more. And again, this is something we call dynamic content, which is you can send a standard email, but it has different content depending on where they are in the buyer's journey. And what it does is it just provides them one of three or four options, which allows you to try and see whether you can find a particular offer that directly relates to this particular prospect. So let's go back to the next step. So we've done the first three steps. The next step is around nurturing. So how do we move people through the different parts of the funnel? So nurturing is all about delivering the right message at the right time. So what we need to do is use triggers like downloads, page visits, or email clicks to fire off very personalized content. So, depending on where they are at the awareness stage, leads tend to get more educational content like videos or blogs. When they get to the consideration stage, we need to start sending them information around comparisons, white papers, or webinars. At the decision stage, you're talking about demos, proposals, and testimonials. So, what you need to do is allow people to move at their own pace, allow them using their triggers to move them automatically through the nurture campaigns. And of course, because we understand who they are, we make sure we converse in their language using relevant campaigns directly to their particular issues or pain points that they need to have addressing. And what you're trying to do effectively is guide them through the sales process. So, how do we go about that engage and nurturing process? Well, the most obvious one is email campaigns, by far the simplest. When we do email campaigns, we tend to do them in little chunks. So we'll send off a series of three or four emails, but we make sure we always have a personal human touch in between each one. So at least we maintain direct dialogue. Um, we can do everything like from industry insights and news, right the way through to poll surveys, newsletters, and dynamic content. As I mentioned, the content can vary depending on where you are in the buying process. Normally, a lot of at the beginning of the funnel, the beginning of the process is around awareness. A recent survey that was carried out looking at content on the internet, around about 55% of all content out there on the internet is geared to the awareness phase. It's all about people understanding the initial element of it. There's very little content. It drops away dramatically as you get down to the analysis and the comparison end. So one of the key things we would do at the early part of any engagement process, or you should need to do, is think not just about the content you need for the awareness phase, but what is the content you need as you come further down the funnel? How can you help people when it gets to the analysis and the comparisons say stage? When they come to the purchase, what information do they need to help them close for you to close the deal? So here's an example here for a IT outsource company where you can see the kind of content that we deliver at different points in the cycle slightly change or vary. And you say towards the sort of the back end or the hard the crunch end of the process, we're looking at things like give us some managed service SLA examples. How does it work with ISI 2001 compliance? What are the case studies that we need to show that we really understand their industry? The final stage is conversion. Um, just because it's got to the point where somebody wants to convert, that doesn't mean you stop doing the basic marketing activities. So we use things like smart emails to ensure there is a brand consistency. And a smart email is an email which is a standard canned email, but you can personalize it and put your own elements on it. So it was good to catch up with you last week. I hope you enjoyed the game with your favorite football team. Here's a bit of information we thought might be useful for you. So we use smart mails so you can get that very, very personalized engagement, but also using brand consistent messaging. Things like the proposal itself can also be sent out on an automation process. So you know when the proposal was viewed and when it was opened and whether they've actually downloaded or consumed the actual content that's on there. Um, you can also do auto-generated tasks. So you make sure that if somebody's reached the opportunity line, you're making sure that nobody ever goes more than 7 days without some sort of direct communication. So even if you don't follow up, then an automation at least keeps people warm for you and doesn't allow them to drop off the engagement curve. So the key here is that marketing and sales don't stop just because you get to closing the deal. You use the systems to make sure you put all the disciplines in place, you maintain all the communication processes, and you carry on the nurture. So you're still putting information around why people would want to work with you, what customers say about you, case studies, and the importance of your values. So you don't stop maintaining that engagement level. After you've closed the sale, you may well carry on and still do referrals, testimonials, cross-sell, upsells. There's a whole series of activities that you may need to do. You can automate your feedback requests, get people just to tell you what they think of you and your service, and do that on a regular basis. So you can use this system with existing customers post-sale to upsell and maintain a level of communication, surveys, polls, whatever else you need to do. So coming back to core principles, you need a business strategy. It's all on there. I think the key one here is drawing up the workflows to capture the profile, engagement, nurture, and conversion stages. It's always about delivering the right message at the right time so you can let people buy at their own pace. It should always be a two-way communication. It should not be one way. And always keep the end-to-end visibility of the customer journey. Make sure you're capturing every single one of those engagements. If you do all of those things, then what you'll start to see here is ultimately, because it's one system, you'll see from where the lead came in. If you've done the capture right, you know the original source, and you'll start to be able to actually see exactly which campaigns that you drove, how many leads they generated, how many sales came as a result of that, and what the value of that sales was. And again, if you then capture your costs, then you can actually work out an ROI. This is just one example here. There are numerous examples from small companies right the way up to very large ones. Companies that implement these systems, we'll talk about it, can see quite a fast ROI. Where are we going into the future? So this is the last stage. So the last part of my presentation today is impacts of AI and privacy and consent. So one thing we now have generative AI, which basically means when we talk to companies about putting together personas, they normally glaze over because they realize it's a lot of work. However, if you can identify one persona, create all the content for one persona, you can use AI to help you do it as long as you define it well with some very clear bullet points to start off with. It will help you suggest and give you the ideas for your content. And again, when you've done one persona, you can use the bots, as they're called, to automatically help to use the same base information and generate a second or third or even a fourth persona. So it's quite easy now to be able to do multiple personas using AI very, very quickly and very, very effectively. The other thing we need to think about is that everything around AI is around data. AI doesn't, as somebody said, Scott Golliver, who's a good friend of mine, AI doesn't create clarity, it amplifies it. If your process data or goals are messy, AI will only make that mess louder. So it's very, very clear that going forward, businesses need to understand that just having a load of data around their customers in their, I don't know, in their billing system is not going to be enough to help them with being able to use the power of AI going forward. What you need to do is have a system that clearly articulates very clean data of all the engagements, all the interactions of your customers, so that you can have a very, very clear. And then when you put the AI on it, it is looking at clear data and therefore it can properly amplify it. And this is very understood by the big companies. We'll talk about that shortly, because coming around the corner is something called agentic AI, which is allowing autonomous decision making agents. On the other side of the coin, we've got privacy. Um, GDPR is being strengthened every day. Third-party cookies are about to go, so the ability to cross-sell or move people between different websites and the follow me ads are going away, which means there is a stronger requirement to have a one-to-one relationship with clear consent. And stronger e-privacy rights means the control will be coming back to the user. So the big push in 2025, if you go out there, is all around brand trusted consent. That is all the big marketing messages at the moment, which is you have to build those three elements, i.e., go back to basics and work directly with your customers and build a trust relationship. Just to give you some example of how some of the big companies are starting to move. I mean, Deliveroo is an example here. It's currently got a value of about 2.1 billion. It finally is, well, in fact, I think it still made a 12 million loss in 2024. It might just have gone into profit this year. Why is it worth so much? The reason it's worth so much is that they have completely disrupted the chain. They've moved people away from being able to buy direct from restaurants and having stuff delivered to them to the point which is they now work through the Deliveroo app. So the food Deliveroo app is now who customers interface and allows them to buy from multiple restaurants. This means that they have complete understanding of exactly what you buy, when you buy, from which restaurants, on which day of the week. They have clean, clear information which shows your complete buying habits around takeaways. So lots of other companies are starting to follow this kind of model and try and make sure they have a full understanding of complete customer and everything they do. So people like Meta and Google are worth what 48 billion, 39 billion, et cetera, et cetera. So they're starting to build up a scenario where their brand is trusted, that they acquire consent, and then they manage the full customer cycle from capturing data, engaging, and converting, doing exactly what we've just done on a massive scale. And what they're effectively building is ecosystems. So Amazon has got to be probably the most well-known one here for doing that. Amazon is brilliant at pulling all of your data, all your buying habits, what you bought, when you bought it last week, going back years, when you go on their website. In fact, when you go on their website, you actually get a complete personalized view, which is based on your history and your engagement and what you're likely to buy next, which means it then targets back to you exactly what it thinks you need to be able to help you, and to the point that you are almost buying stuff before you even know you need it. And that is the nirvana of where it's going. Amazon's cracked it, Google's working on it, Meta's working on it. There are a big push to these large conglomerates now where they are running these complete systems, taking your data, using it, and then creating targeted adverts back. So, how do we compete in this kind of world? So to compete in this kind of world, the big boys are always going to be looking for the mass market, big opportunities. The niches, which your business may well be, will allow you to be able to operate your own scenario of capturing the data, analyzing it, and targeting it, and sending information back. So it's all about understanding your customer, building AI to build generated content for each persona, systemizing and automating your sales and marketing processes, capture, engage, etc., etc. So basically, you do a mini version of what the big boys are doing. So, marketing automation solutions, you put up a system like this, marketing automation in a box. It will typically give you 30% growth within 6 months. However, it requires time, skills, resources, and budget to set it up. Who does it work for? Well, any company that's looking to systemize their sales and marketing processes and wants to do more of what they have. It works very, very good in the B2B businesses, very good for anybody who needs to make a considered purchase with a complex sales cycle, very, very good for professional services companies and all fast growth setups. Um, all digital marketing, there's sort of three ways that you can go about setting up the system. One, you can just go find the system yourself, work with them. They will give you all of the technical materials to help you set it up, but they won't do it for you. So you have to learn it all for yourself. Alternatively, you could just outsource the whole problem, just give it to a third party and say, go find me some leads and sales and bring them to my door. And they'll charge you £400, £500 for every lead with an appointment behind it. And then the third way is to build your own, but use a trusted partner to work with you. So, all digital marketing is quite happy to help you map out your buyer's journey, help you build your sales and marketing in a box, transfer it over to you so you take ownership and management of it, and then be on the back to handhold just to make sure it goes the right way. So, the kind of thing we do is like a 90-day plan where you can get sales and marketing in a box. You fully own it and manage it. All we do is we'll help you set it up. And to do that, we'll help you do your buyer journey, persona led funnel design, help you with the AI generated content and show you how to use it, set up your landing pages, do your smart emails, CRM setup. We do the whole works for you right the way down to training and handover. And then literally, you have a complete system for yourself. There's a series of packages from the sort of the start of the silver and the gold package, which range between about 2 and 5K, just as a typical kind of idea of cost. Um, Next step is about keeping you informed. By all means, I think you're already on the newsletter. We can obviously do you a demo of any one of these systems to give you an idea of how they could work for you. And I think you guys are mostly connected anyway on LinkedIn. So any questions? Anybody would like to ask anything?